Hi everybody again, it's Rick Walton, and yes, I'm in my garden again, and yes, I'm under the trees a bit because of the bright sunshine. Question for me, Rick, why are you here again? I'll tell you, friends, I've kind of been dared by my great mate, my buddy, Canadian soul brother, Carlos Oyogiza, to, I was going to say review, but you be the judge of that, to kind of discuss or air for the universe some thoughts about Nirvana, MTV Unplugged, back in 93, 94, 93. I think it actually went out, because he obviously loves it. And that definitely sparked my interest more than. So I'm kind of going to do it, but it's very much a come as you are theme. So it's going to be under rehearsed. I'm going to make it loads of it up, like Kurt Cobain did himself. Actually, I'm going to have like a crib sheet he did for the gig, which kind of interested me in a way. In fact, loads of stuff about it did. So, two things, and there's quite nice serendipity going on about this because Carlos, tried to blag me into doing this thing, a couple of weeks ago, and in that period, completely coincidentally, the montage of Heck, it's called. Well, that's probably an in-joke. I don't get it entirely, but the documentary montage of Heck about Kurt Cobain and Nirvana was on here yesterday or the day before. So I watched that. I watched it a couple of times. I actually strongly recommend that as an individual. It's a pretty extraordinary work of art in its own right, and I think I love it. I want to watch it again, but it was kind of brilliant in terms of feeding into the stuff that I'm going to warble on about now. Okay. As I was saying, I've got a crib sheet because I want to kind of go through the set list in a way. It won't be hours, I promise. And try and say something as a start of a 10, as part of a conversation about that gig. Okay? In doing that, I know, and this is the difficulty in it with Cobain, and not just him, but that it's going to bring out the COD psychologist in me, in all of us, the trauma, the tragedy, the death some months after this gig, all of that. I am going to be so guilty of that. It's unbelievable, but I love all that stuff as well, forgive me. And I think we might chance upon the occasional relevant comment in trying to do that. Okay, onwards. So, live recording, right, for MTV, and there's already a sort of opposition thing there because plainly, and it's become more plain to me having watched this stuff, Cobain in particular, maybe, or the band generally, had a real kind of issue with the industry. Why wouldn't they? Any right-minded, vaguely punky, grungy geezer or woman would have with the music industry. It stinks, as does the TV industry in many ways. We get that. Cobain was pretty abrasive about that stuff, I think. So, and I've just been reading a little bit of stuff about this. Sorry, the light thing is going to flash and flicker, but ignore it. He kind of took on MTV. I'm led to believe in rehearsals, they rehearsed this pretty hard because they were a big band by then, arguably the biggest in the world, and they knew what they were doing and they wanted to do, and they probably felt quite justifiably that they had every right to project themselves in the way they wanted. So apparently there's quite a lot of stuff going on during the couple of days of rehearsals. MTV wanted them to play the hits. Yawn. I mean, of course the hits are great, but you know what I mean in terms of the philosophy of the whole thing. Stank for Cobain in particular, who said, sorry guys, not doing it, not like that, not doing it your way. What we're going to do is, rather than think stadium gig and reduce it, we're going to make this a proper little gig in its own right, on its own scale. And yes, I am going to get my mates, the Meat Puppets, who were touring with Nirvana at that time, in on this, because they're great guys and talented people, and no, I'm not having, duets with the superstars that MTV may have wanted. So there was friction, right? And I've got no doubt that followed Cobain about quite a lot, but I'm with him on most of that. So there is that backdrop, I think, before they even start, and I think they start late, and it's kind of quite interesting. Yeah, the first thing I think you hear from memory on the recording, or see on the live recording, or the DVD or whatever you watch or listen to, is Cobain, in a slightly surly way, introducing the first song, which is about the girl, with this little phrase, this is off our first album, most people won't know that. Again, that little sort of opposition thing about love-hate with the audience and the media and the industry, which kind of fed a lot of the spunkiness and bile, maybe not a bad word in this respect actually, about them as a band. I respect them for that stuff, right? Okay, about a girl, notably for me, going back to this, and I don't know all the songs all that well, I know some of them well, but magic little line in that, I do think you fit this shoe. Like it, searching, kind of brilliant, kind of poetic, but it's characterised that song and as a statement, if you like, as the opener. There's a lot of belly in that vocal. It's kind of characteristic of Cobain in that mode, and I like the challenge of that. It's a strong beginning. After that, it's Come As You Are, which has become anthemic, probably was already by then, and is, I don't like this word classic much, but it is classic in many ways. There's a classic bassy or bass and bassy riff with that tuned down guitar sound, the echoey, rakish, spangly guitar, some of which I think almost certainly, well definitely some of which was mic'd up, was through an amp. His guitar was on 2 or 3 of the songs, notably the Bowie cover, we'll come to that. So they slightly broke the rules on that. I think Cobain absolutely insisted that his guitar could go through amps if and when he needed it to make it right, to make it feel like him. And maybe actually, somebody's argued, maybe he could hide behind that a bit. Interesting, but he did. And it's there on Come As You Are, I think, that lovely echoey thing. The song itself, and I do think it's a biggie, it's monumental, and I'm going to use that word again, I think probably, an anthemic. I love this idea, central to nearly everything, that it's about truth, horrible, overused, underused word. It's about stuff that's really central to Kurt. It's saying, stop hiding, show me, be true for me. And I think lots of us get that, even if it's not articulated completely to us, that yearning and anger is in there. I think it's a magnificent song, I do, but it's also really poignant and really evocative. So I get that would be maybe one of the things that my mate in Canada and your mate in Manila and your uncle in Sydney might identify with and be drawn with. There is something universally powerful about that, and it's great. Yeah, it's a big number, that, and very strong on the night. Interestingly, and again, not untypically, because they're bright guys, these guys, and they're trying to do stuff that is different, bless them. They're not just a rock, a run-of-the-mill rock band. They hate that, I think. They hate that. And they're trying to do stuff that's profound, but also small and beautiful and challenging in a kind of intellectual way, dare I say, pompously. So anyway, they do Jesus Doesn't Want Me for a Sunbeam, which is a Vaseline's. It's a cover. There are 6 covers on this night. Is it 15, 16, 17 songs? Can't remember. But which is interesting in itself, I think. And it's smart, because if it's grunge, it's more grunge folk than not. The accordion is in there. It's Novoselic, isn't it? The name of the guy who's playing the Christ, I imagine, rather than Christ, Novoselic. Puts the bass down and gets out an accordion, and it's a bit like the Pogues in a way. It reminded me of that. Not that they're being derivative, but they are making a statement about folkiness and that they've got a range of things. They aren't just doing you know, 3-chord, grungy stuff that became stadium rock friendly. They're not just doing that. They're too smart for that. They're no mugs, so they're on top of this thing, and in a way that suggests, on the one hand, they've really thought about their set list and the variety of it all. On the other hand, they do throw that set list slightly out the window later on. But on this song, Jesus Doesn't Want Me for a Sunbeam, I was kind of struck by that fact of Kurt being kind of cool and on top of this, not arrogant, but low-key-ish. And I liked the variety. I thought that was smart. Excuse me while I flick the page to check my notes. I've got a little note in here, something about already there is a sense of Kurt's, and not just his, I'm sure Grolsch had the same kind of feeling. They've got a certain level of contempt for the industry, and I do wonder if that inevitably or partly or something sets Cobain free. That kind of anger, spittle in a way, allows him or frees him up to get real, to get really personal. And that's a general comment rather than something just about this song. But some of that is in there, that absolute freedom. Is it spite? Maybe there's some spite in there because he has got a real contempt for a great deal of the way in which the universe, particularly the world of music and media, operates, and who wouldn't be with him on that, right? Okay, after that we do get another one of the cover versions, David Bowie's song "Man Who Sold the World." Interestingly, again, because I've read a few things, and there are plenty of things in the montage of Heck suggesting from band members and family members that Kurt Cobain really could not handle the thought of being not exposed, humiliated, I think is the word they've tended to use. He was very conscious of being judged. Much of his work is absolutely full of that sense, I think. But this idea that he might be, exposed in a bad way, undermined, and we can get very psychological about this, about family life, can't we? We can go back into that, the kind of rootlessness, the absolute dysfunction that was his family life early on, and therefore, that insecurity, which he sings about literally, is big. It's big. Sorry, that's a very roundabout way of getting to what he said. What he said was, I guarantee you I will screw this up, before he played this song. Which, was kind of noteworthy, I thought, because he still seemed very much in control. It wasn't said in a really nervy kind of way. It was just the kind of thing he might say, I think, because of that insecurity stuff gathering always. Anyway, it's a very strong song. Again, there's a great bass or bassy riff. Characteristic, again, very Nirvana friendly. And that magic guitar lick, which again, he definitely plays through his amp with probably a fair bit of sustain, if I remember, or if I can quite hear it in my head, picture it. All that stuff lends itself to Nirvana-ization, doesn't it? And also the subject of the song is pretty close to the sort of deceit of the filthy capitalist system, isn't it, really? Control. It's about control. And some fascist geezer imagined, I think, really. At the end of it, he says, because it's gone well, it's sounding really good, I didn't screw that up. And he goes on then to one of the highlights, but also one of the things that's really kind of tough to listen to in a way, Penny Royalty, because it's agonisingly personal. I sit and drink Penny Royalty, I'm anemic royalty. Brilliant. I'm so tired I can't sleep. I'm a liar and a thief. It's, as I say, agonisingly autobiographical. It's a really searing, confessional thing. But is it phony? No, it ain't. Not from this guy. doesn't feel it, doesn't sound it. It's absolutely the core of what he does. I think you can kind of hear his poisoned belly. He has got a poisoned belly, right, at this time. There's lots of discussion around, because of abuse, self-abuse, on different levels. Drugs, obviously, chiefly, but he kind of emaciated in the last year or so of his life. Probably never well anyway or anything, but it's not just about food. It's about pain and poison. I believe there were times where he would cough up blood when he was singing. You can kind of hear that, as well as the dysfunction and trauma from which it springs. I think you really can hear that. So I was kind of moved by it. It's not a song I was really that familiar with, but all those symptoms and all that illness, all that autobiography is in there. It's extraordinary, really extraordinary, that song, Penny Royalty. After that, there is Dumb and then Polly, both of which I knew reasonably, and both of which are strong. They are strong. Notable, Dumb. I think I'm dumb. I think I'm dumb. He keeps saying it. Clearly, he ain't. And he kind of knows that, and yet there is that fear, that insecurity, that painful honesty and irony, actually, because he knows he's smart as well. Interesting that he describes in the banter in between the two songs as them being the same song, effectively. Polly, clearly about a woman, but who is Polly? She is also a victim of stuff. Found that kind of quite rich and quite interesting. But do you know what? I'm going to keep scooting on because I'm thinking of time here. They are good. They are strong, those two as well. After that, On a Plane, which I was intrigued by, just the word plane, Plain, rather than Plane. Interchangeable, probably, because it's kind of about lifestyle and deep stuff again. I love myself better than you. I'm on a plane. I can't complain. So in one sense, on a pedestal. In another sense, fraught. And despite the saying, he's saying, "I love myself better than you." Well, there are lots of ways of reading that, aren't there? Right? It's deeply personal again, and kind of caustic again. That's maybe another word I would put in there. After that, Something in the Way. I haven't got huge notes on it. After that is where he brings on the two meat puppets, the brothers. They play Plateau, Oh Me, and Lake of Fire. And if there's a theme here, it's that we're kind of shifting towards inevitably acoustic, but acoustic blues, really. Guitar from those guys and his delivery over it. I'm not saying it's undermined or it's trad, it's Nirvana-ized, but it's kind of quite interesting that theme is there, as is in Lake of Fire, most obviously perhaps this idea of judgment, and things biblical maybe. That's very bluesy, and it's also very Kurt Cobain. It's something that struck me as we went on, and I'm going to go on to All Apologies, which finest moment, quite possibly. This is the moment where the gig soars and we soar. What else should I be? What else should I be? Wow. It's raw, but it's rolling along with a great riff. Actually, yeah, inseparable. This is, I think it's at every level. This is a great song. It's a real challenge. It's a real triumph. The dynamism of the song, the way it does soar, kind of, and lifts the heart, is really striking. One of their great moments. Great moments. After that, a Lead Belly, a cover of a Lead Belly song, Where Did You Sleep Last Night? And there's lots of stuff. Watch the documentary that I mentioned, that might suggest that really might be sharp and poignant, in respect of Courtney Love and their relationship, it might not be about that, of course, but the stuff in there that makes you wonder. And again, the whole idea that, okay, I'm playing with words here, but lead belly. What is Cobain if not somebody singing from a kind of poison core? He's got his own lead belly, and and no wonder we hear the pain through this, not just through this song, throughout. He's really sharing those, again, very bluesy agonies, actually. And I think, again, when the vocal tears away, you hear it, you really hear it. I've got to go, yeah, I'm just going to talk generally, because we kind of covered it-ish, says he. Things that struck me. Cello. They've got a friend of theirs, a woman whose name I didn't catch, I'll be honest, adding some cello, which again feels very fitting. Okay, it's acoustic and they're going to do something different anyway, but is there not something beautiful and coruscating about that particular sound, and also melancholic, which figures for me, just figures. So it's, when it's beautiful, it's also tends to be very melancholy, and that sits well, or maybe even symbolises the deep affairs that we're running through here. Yeah, added an extra dimension in musical terms, but in terms that kind of reach a bit further as well, I think. Generally, there's this, we can hear, can't we, that Cobain is a really damaged soul, and yet brilliant. I contradict this completely, because these guys are rock and roll guys. They've been on tour a lot. They are big. They are confident in many, many ways, despite that stuff I've already said about Cobain in particular. So they are what we've called waggish over here. They are wags, they're lads, they're a laugh. I bet they did have some laughs, actually, as well, in the difficulties. And Cobain may well have been difficult. There's a moment during this gig where they're waiting for a guitar to be tuned up. And it takes ages. And it's actually really quite funny, I think, that Cobain says, what are they tuning? A harp? And I just, I kind of quite like that sense. Actually, thank God, they probably had some laddish laughs as well. Why wouldn't they? But you wonder, in contrast, I'm sorry, I'm off the top of my head here a bit, but inevitably Cobain, because of the drugs, because of the traumatic upbringing, how could he not be challenging maybe at times to work with, to work alongside? How could he be reliable and, even straight enough to be dealt with in a normal way? Impossible. Just not going to happen all the time. It's cruel, and I'm fighting against comparing him, let's say, to somebody like Ian Curtis from Joy Division. I feel like there are similarities, and I also feel it's demeaning to even mention it, but both share a kind of poetry and a kind of deep, traumatic, personal history, which leaves them really, really vulnerable. They're both very, very vulnerable guys. You feel both of them, actually, but let's try and stick with Cobain. They're both battling, but shining a light towards something, a kind of truth which is very clear to them often, and that kind of laser-like awareness is there in the lyrics and those metaphors, the ideas, very often. And yet, obviously, it's painfully clear to all of us that much of the time he can't get there. He's denied the possibility of getting there because the universe around him is crap and not as honest and as true as him, and he feels that, and it drags him down to despair. hence this cycle, and sorry for the cod psychology, but the whole drugs thing and all the rest of it is clearly a part of that. But his life has always been stuffed full of so much disharmony, judgment, denuded esteem, low self-esteem, chronic no esteem, uh, for the path that he's trying to find or show us in all his generosity. And there is a massive dollop of generosity here. Surely, if he's been this autobiographical, this searching, this open, he can't show or find the path properly, consistently, forever, because there's damage. It's not, it's not, you can't see it as being safe or real or wide or consistent enough. But that's his job as a poet, right? This is where the poetry comes in, and not that one always has to suffer for one's art, but he's doing it. He did do it. There is something magnificent and obviously poignant about that. On that, there's also, I think, something magnificent, ironically maybe, and moralistic even, about that search, which he probably does share with other people who we've loved and lost. He cared, obviously sounds hugely clear, but cared massively. Huge-hearted man, but deeply vulnerable. He couldn't cope. He didn't have the kind of roots that would be necessary to cope, partly because of the self-abuse that I've spoken about. I think, trying to conclude, what kind of is thrilling but also poignant is this idea that, and I'm trying to be specific about the gig, you can hear it and you can feel it in the ether around this gig. He really is, he is trying to hold himself and us to account. He's got these extraordinary preacher-like standards, in a sense. Is that fair? I think it feels like it. He's offering us bigger themes in a way, and tragedy inevitably is biblical, for want of a better word. It kind of is. So there are these very deep layers of meaning that, inevitably have accumulated after the death over the years. But it's there, much of this stuff is there in the songwriting, in the voice, in the sound. So, having watched the documentary, and I do finally want you to come back to that, really worth watching. It really kind of fleshes out this sense that he was a beautiful but damaged man, really beautiful man. He was a really flawed monumentalist, and by that I mean these things are powerful, magical, important, though they might be 3 minutes of throwaway rock and roll. They are. They touch so many people so deeply, including my mate Carl and myself now. That soars, that is important. And a good deal of this particular performance, Nirvana MTV Unplugged, feels monumentally good. I'm off.